afternoon, everyone. It's great to be with you for another in our series of Conversations with Olmsted. Today, we're going to focus on nature, mental health, and campus design, issues of personal and professional concern to Frederick Law Olmsted. I'm Dee Dee Petri, President and CEO of the Olmsted Network, and I'm glad to see so many joining us for this important conversation. Before we begin, I want to invite you to visit our olmsted.org website to stay up to date on all of the efforts underway. Be sure to check out our blog and calendar where you'll find many exciting upcoming opportunities. In June, the Olmsted Network will host a tour of Dunn Gardens in Seattle. And in July, go to the Olmsted Beale Farmhouse on Staten Island, where Olmsted incubated so many of his design ideas. These pop-up trips, as we call them, are designed to give you a short, no-frills opportunity to see great Olmsted landscapes and to network with other Olmsted aficionados around the country. You can register online. On Wednesday of next week, we'll open registration for our annual conference, Landscapes of Renewal, Olmsted, Vaux, and Downing. Without exaggeration, I can say that this trip offers inspiring discussion and fantastic tours, including a visit to Downing Park, a dinner cruise on the Hudson, a tour of Vassar, and a continuing discussion of the ways Olmsted designs are key to mental and physical well-being. We have an incredible array of experts joining us, including Dr. Frank Kowski, who will talk about Calvert Vaux on his 200th birthday, Morgan Monaco of Prospect Park on public-private partnerships, and Dr. Elizabeth Bradley, president of Vassar, on parks and public health. Today, we turn to an important area of Olmsted activity, Olmsted campus design. By any calculation, the Olmsted firm had an outsized impact in this area. In a period of 100 years, Frederick Law Olmsted and the firm undertook 411 campus commissions. Olmsted Senior designed campuses, Trinity, Gallaudet, University of Maine, and Stanford in the 1880s, which we'll discuss today. Olmsted Brothers undertook projects in the 1930s at scores of institutions, including Duke, Denison, Ohio State, Sewanee, Harvard, Wellesley, and Johns Hopkins. You can learn more by checking the blog in the chat box. Can campus design and connections to nature make students happier and result in a better educational experience? Can campus design advance environmental stewardship? Frederick Law Olmsted certainly thought so, and more modern campus leaders agree. We have a great group of panelists today who will discuss how our institutions are connecting students to nature and using campus design to enhance physical and environmental well-being. Moderating our discussion is Dr. Dorothy Ebus, who is a member of the William and Mary Environmental and Sustainability Program and co-director of the Campus Nature RX Network, established in 2019. Nature RX builds on the Olmsted conviction that connection with nature is critical to mental and physical well-being. This program is now available at 56 universities, and many campuses have adopted similar programs across the country. On our panel, we welcome Kathy Blake, who's no stranger to the Olmsted Network. She's been active in landscape architecture for over 40 years, and for the last 25, she has served as Stanford's University Landscape Architect and Director of Campus Planning. Kathy's been a critical player in Stanford's return to Olmsted's original design. From Atlanta, we welcome Howard Wertheimer at Georgia Tech. From 2006 to 2019, Howard served as the Assistant Vice President for Capital Planning and Space Management and Institute Architect at Georgia Tech, where he had oversight of the campus master plan, landscape master plan, and historic preservation. While Georgia Tech is inspired by Olmsted, it is not an Olmsted design. From Alabama, we're pleased to welcome Chancellor Jack Hawkins of Troy University. On August 1, 1928, the Alabama Board of Education signed a contract with the Olmsted brothers to make plans for higher education institutions around the state. The Olmsted brothers firm worked at Troy for decades, and we are delighted to draw attention to the recent decision by campus leaders at the main campus to return to the original Olmsted brothers design. With that, let me turn this over to our moderator, Dr. Ebus. Welcome, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much, Dee Dee. It's really an honor to be here today celebrating Olmsted and moderating this important discussion with our experts. Olmsted has greatly inspired and informed my work, my teaching, my research and outreach and advocacy is dedicated to first supporting people of all walks of life and cultivating a real meaningful, nurturing, reciprocal relationship with the natural world, particularly focusing on young people, and also advocating for the integration of nature into the very fabric of our lives. So our homes, our workspaces, healthcare systems, civic spaces, and educational institutions. But I would be remiss in not saying that I owe a particular debt of gratitude to Olmsted as a single working parent of two incredibly energetic, nature-loving young boys. I surely would have lost my mind attempting to raise them and work without the quality parks and outdoor spaces that he and those he influenced helped to create. So an extra debt of gratitude there. Olmsted's philosophy also informs the Campus Nature RX network that I co-direct with Dawn Rakow from Cornell. So I'm just going to share a paragraph about this before we proceed, as it's very relevant to this discussion. So the Campus Nature RX network began as a handful of us from 4 universities, featured by Don Rakow and his colleague in their 2019 book called Nature RX, Improving College Student Mental Health. So today, Dawn and I co-direct the Campus Nature RX network, which has really exploded over the last couple of years in particular, much thanks to a grant from the REI Cooperative Action Fund. So we now represent some 70 academic institutions and over 100 professionals dedicated to supporting campus mental and physical health through inclusive and equitable nature engagement teaching, research, and outreach. Membership is free and open to anyone with an ongoing affiliation at an academic institution interested in nature and health. We have a free virtual symposium each fall, open to literally anyone, anywhere. We have a free newsletter, a growing YouTube channel, and are launching a new certification program called the Campus Nature RX Academy, where Dawn and I will be guiding campus teams in visioning, developing, and expanding their Campus Nature RX programs. And REI funding is supporting Academy scholarships for campuses that serve primarily BIPOC or first-generation students to promote nature equity on campuses. So if anyone's interested in that, please check out, visit us at campusnature.com, or I'm sure you can Google Campus Nature RX Network. So let's begin the discussion. I do have a list of questions to ask our panelists, but I encourage attendees to please type your questions in the chat and we will get to them at the end of the program. So Richard Louv, who wrote, of course, Last Child in the Woods and other very influential books, and coined the term nature deficit disorder, called Olmsted a visionary when it came to understanding the mental and physical benefits of nature engagement. So I'd like to ask each of the panelists to share in what ways are your campuses utilizing nature-based programming, biophilic design, campus landscapes, or similar to advance student physical and mental well-being. I'd like to start with Kathy and then Chancellor Hawkins and then Howard, please. So Kathy, if you'd like to begin.
We're starting with the biophilic. Well, we have a campus that Olmsted designed surrounded by nature. And given the California climate, we have a lot of indoor-outdoor experiences. And repeatedly, as I talk to students, their favorite places are going into the wilds, into the arboretum, walking the dish at the foothills. Being outside is very important. And most of our buildings now are being designed so that there's views of nature. And after the pandemic, we found that people held classrooms outside because they were afraid to be inside. And now that it's relatively over, they still want to be outside. We're looking at permanent classrooms. They don't want to go back indoors. And I find that this is really a remarkable kind of change for the university and a new challenge for us.
Kathy. Chancellor Hawkins.
Thank you so much. And let me say it's an honor to be a part of a panel with a group of experts. In fact, I look forward to learning from each of you and how we might use the lessons we learn to open our campus and campuses even more. I might, within, just to create the framework for that response. Troy University is a multi-campus system, but the original campus was in Troy, and it was established in 1887. In 1899, the president at the time, Dr. Shackelford, expressed interest in moving out of the center of Troy to a nearby area of a couple of hundred acres. So we began with a lot of acreage that has since been expanded to about 650 acres within that are contiguous in this city and on the outskirts. And so there's a lot to work with, but the original design was around the quad, and that quad began with the first constructed building was in 1930, 2 years after the plan was received. Our plans were lost, though, after the building was constructed and not rediscovered for 60 years. And it was based on the rediscovery of those plans that this one student who was doing research that led to the rediscovery, he presented those to a professor who held them for a couple of years, and then he brought them to the administration. I've been fortunate to be part of Troy since 1989. And so it's been 35 years of service here. And so much of what we've seen has happened within those decades. But it was in the year 2000 that we received some beautiful artwork from one of our alumni. And after the ceremony, when we received that artwork, we walked out to the center of the quad. And by that time, there was an orchard of pecan trees, and there was a semicircular driveway. Now, the key to that was there were 100 named parking spaces around that driveway that originally had been intended to be a quad. Now, if there's anything more valuable to a faculty member than a parking space with their name on it, I'd like to know what that might be. And so it was there that in the center of that orchard that this alumnus said, we need a landmark at Troy. At University of Alabama, they have Denny Chimes, they have Sanford Hall. At Auburn University, on each of your campuses, you have a landmark. We really didn't have that. And I was intrigued by that comment. A week later, he came back with a check for $50,000. And he said, I want to make irreversible that conversation. And it was not long after that that it occurred to us that the most important thing we could do would be to reflect upon Olmsted's plan. And so we launched a campaign. And I later told that alumnus that the good news was that we had $50,000. The bad news was that it cost us $3 million to return that quad to the original plan. But I can assure you that has had a ripple effect throughout the years that have passed. We opened the renovated quad, as it were, in 2004, thinking that it might become a real landmark in this part of the state. And since that time, it literally has become one of the most often photographed places in South Alabama and Southeast Alabama. And it goes back to that plan. I think in answer to your question, it opened up this campus. We were already more open than most. I spent 10 years with an urban university, and I know how we valued that green space. Here, sometimes we take it for granted, but the green space is used daily. Even now, the quad, now that the oak trees we planted 20 years ago have matured. We have an arboretum that consists of about 80 acres. That's an integral part of our academic programming. In the last 8 years, we opened a cultural arts park where we took a kudzu covered ravine and turned it into a beautiful setting where now more than 200 terracotta warriors from Xi'an in China now stand, life-size warriors. And so you can see in Troy what you couldn't see until you go 10,000 miles from here. And so all of that, it has become integral to our educational programs. It's not uncommon for classes to be taught outside. And after COVID, obviously, there's more of a tendency. But I think there's because of the beauty of the campus, and I'm very proud of that fact, not labeled thus by us, but labeled so by travel magazines. and other groups that this is Alabama's most beautiful campus. We take great pride in that. The beauty itself is an attraction. And so we have, there are very few obstacles to enticing our students, faculty, staff, and community to go outdoors, and we value that open space.
Howard, and if you want, I can reframe the conversation, or do you remember the question?
I do. So I'm at Georgia Tech in Atlanta, Georgia, so the Piedmont. So it's a little bit hilly at times. 400-acre campus, public university. And I think for me as an architect and the campus architect and a planner, it's really the spaces between the buildings that create the memories. And I think as the chancellor just alluded to, people are coming to the campuses to really enjoy the outdoors and enjoy nature. In the architecture that we create on our campus, it is bio-inspired design, it's biophilic, so access to natural light is really important. There were a few mistakes my predecessors several decades ago made, where windows were less sacred and views to the outside were deemed as a distraction for student learning. But we've sort of have taken that to a whole new level where we have buildings that open up fully to the outdoors. We've created a lot of outdoor gathering spaces and meeting and learning spaces, teaching and learning spaces. So the campus really has become a living learning laboratory pedagogically for our students, for our faculty, our staff. And it's not just, designing the campus and then our landscape services folks come and cut the grass and rake the leaves and, trim the trees. So it's really important that the campus is a living, breathing organism. And we're very deliberate about, while we have very smart students, they all have a lot of electrical devices. So we have electrical power outlets all over campus under the shade of trees where there's movable tables and chairs so they could enjoy being outside. Faculty can go out there. And I think that's become more and more popular at many universities across the country. So, and similar to others on this call and other campuses, we are an arboretum, but it's not a dedicated space on the campus. It's equally distributed around the campus, much in the same way our academic programs are distributed throughout the campus. So I'll pause there.
Thank you, Howard. It's really exciting to hear that all of these campuses are thinking about these things. I remember working on in my Parks and Ecotherapy Research Lab. I've been running at William & Mary since 2013. And I would say for the first 10 years, I couldn't really find anybody who was really thinking about student mental health and green spaces on campus. And so it's really wonderful to hear all of you, and campuses have been thinking about this for many years. So moving on to the next question. Well, we think of the Olmsteds as park designers. In so many ways, they have also made a lasting impression on American campuses and beyond. I want to explore a little further with our panelists the essence of Olmsted campus design and why it is such a fruitful approach. So I will direct a specific question to each of you. So I'll start with Kathy. So we understand that Leland Stanford disagreed with Olmsted on the campus plan, and now decades later, the university is revisiting Olmsted's original plans from the 1880s. Please explain for us what you have done with these plans and why.
Well, let me go back to the first disagreements between Olmsted and Leland Stanford. Olmsted, when he was hired, Frederick Law Olmsted, he wanted to put the campus in the foothills with very romantic roads leading through the oak trees on a very gentle kind of curvilinear pathways. And Leland vehemently disagreed. He was building a monument to his son. He was a senator. He built the railroads. He was a very practical industrial man. And he wanted, and we lived in California with a mission style of architecture. And he completely disagreed with Olmsted. The resulting dialogue between them ended up being what we call the Olmsted Plan. And it was a compromise where the central campus is a California mission style on the flat land. It's very geometric. It's got a series of quads and grids that are rectilinear. And surrounding that is nature, is the Arboretum on the one side, on the north, and the foothills on the south. The Stanfords gave the university 8,000 acres. Our main campus is 500 of those. So all the rest is natural environment. Well, we'd later build a shopping center, a business park, but the large majority is open space. And the main entry to the campus went due north to the railroad, which Leland owned the railroad. So you can tell, so the compromise was a blending of the two. And later I saw that as Olmsted went on and the brothers went on, many other campuses and designs were influenced by this strategy. Basically, it's a processional entry culminating in an oval that leads to a series of tightly knit buildings and quads, always surrounded by nature and informal pathways. And you see that at the Columbian Exposition in 1893, Washington University, 1895, Johns Hopkins University, 1915, and a number of other plans. So the result of this integration between the two was actually pretty successful. On our campus, as the years went on, particularly after World War II, when all the VGIs were coming back, and there was a large amount of development, we also had Thomas Church influencing things with the more kind of casual, trying to unwind the geometry of Olmsted. And so by our 100-year anniversary, 1990, the trustees said to the campus planners, where are we going? What's our plan? We don't even know what we're doing here. So the campus planners basically came up with a diagram that reestablished the Olmsted plan. And there were two big differences. Stanford, as a little cow town in 1880s, had grown faster and bigger than anybody ever anticipated, along with the entirety of Silicon Valley. And also, we now have an automobile. So the new plan took all the geometry of Olmsted, took a single row of quads that went east-west and made it a triple row of quads that kind of faded out, and it was surrounded by a loop road. And so for the past 35 years, we've actually been rebuilding that plan. And that plan was based on many principles, and some of the Olmsted principles are the ones we adhere to today, which is why we think it's so valid. He talked about climate appropriate design. He talked about transit-oriented design, indoor, outdoor, working with nature, using landscape not as decoration, but for its intrinsic value, and using low water requirement. All of the principles he had, but he also had it about inclusion. They were interdisciplinary quads. It was women from the very beginning at the campus. And he really believed that the university itself should be and was sustainable. And so when we go back to the plan, it's not only the physical plan, but all of the principles he had are the same principles people are aiming for today.
Thank you, Kathy. So Chancellor Hawkins, I have a similar question for you. Troy obtained an Olmsted Brothers plan in the 1930s, but it wasn't fully realized. What prompted you to return to those plans in the early 2000s? And if you could please explain what you did and why?
Well, I somewhat captured the background of that a few minutes ago, but I think we had an opportunity. We had an opportunity to reflect upon where we had been and recreate where we were going. And I think what we saw as very desirable about the original Olmsted plan was that it really opened us up. You know, we had given way, like so many other campuses, and Kathy just alluded to this, to the automobile. And when we had an opportunity to recreate, you know, it's always easier to draw the picture on a blank slate. But if you can do that, you're fortunate. We had to redraw our picture. And when we did that, that was when we rearranged the centerpiece of the campus. It prompted us because we wanted to return to green space. We wanted to remove the vehicles, which was no easy matter. It was no easy matter either to start over. We had an orchard of pecan trees, but many of those trees over time had been damaged by hurricanes and insects and so forth. And And so it was quite a response from the community and many of the students and faculty when we began to cut those trees. But we saw this as an opportunity. And today, I think people are very grateful for that second chance that we were given to do it right. And so it was in part driven by our desire to return the space to pedestrian traffic. It was done to remove the vehicles, but it was done to do it right. And I think we've been very, very pleased with what has happened, because it truly has had a ripple effect throughout the campus. I'm delighted by the pride that our students and our faculty and staff have in the campus itself. I'm delighted when I see students literally reach down and pick up paper on campus, and I see that on a regular basis. That's a manifestation of pride, and that pride runs deep into the culture of the university. And so we're very, very grateful for the plan that we were given. And it's often said, if you plan to fail, you fail. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail. And I think by receiving that plan and resurrecting that as a desirable element of this environment, we were able to recreate and benefit.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So Howard, you're at Georgia Tech, which is not an Olmsted designed campus, but it has been inspired by his work. Please explain how your campus spaces reflect Olmsted's philosophy and what you are doing there.
Sure. So Georgia Tech was established in 1885. And around that same time, Frederick Law Olmsted was doing work in Atlanta, Georgia. I don't think it was called the Olmsted Linear Park when he designed it, but that's what it's called today. The Olmsted brothers designed Grant Park, which is the oldest park in Atlanta. And then the Olmsted brothers developed a plan for Piedmont Park in 1909. So I can't help but think that there were some influences of Olmsted in the air and in the DNA at Georgia Tech. However, the automobile wasn't as prevalent back then as it is today. And over time, when I arrived at Georgia Tech in 2006, we had a proliferation of asphalt parking. And we've been very deliberate in removing that parking spaces, those parking lots, turning it into green space. Georgia Tech never had a central green space on campus. We had little pockets of pathways. And now we have a central green that's called Tech Green. We've been very deliberate about planting trees. We have over 12,000 trees on our campus. We have a tree recompense that with all of our capital projects, that if a tree comes down, there's a formula that the landscape architects on that design team have to comply with. And rather than trees that do come down through storm or disease or through development, rather than turning those trees into mulch, which is pretty sustainable, I developed a tree cycling program where those trees were cut and milled and then incorporated into our building. So bringing back that biophilic design component. But we continue to increase green space, reduce asphalt, remove cars from the center of campus. And then the other piece that I think is really important is stormwater management. And how do we in Atlanta, Georgia, protect our primary source of potable water, and that's the Chattahoochee River. So I feel that we have this obligation to retain the stormwater that comes onto our campus and not have it go into our combined sewer system. So I think it's good stewardship of the land, which I think philosophically is where the Olmsted firm, felt was really important to them, to not cause harm to your adjacent neighborhood or communities. So I think it's an ongoing work in progress. As I mentioned, we plant a lot of trees. Our design teams have to, when they show renderings, it's very easy for them to show beautiful trees, but we ask them to show what those trees will look like day 1, year 5, year 10, year 20, year 50, because we're planting these trees not for ourselves, but for future generations of students, faculty, staff, and visitors who will come to campus.
Thank you, Howard. Thank you, everybody. Very interesting. I'll say that William and Mary, over the 10 years I've been there, has, especially post-COVID, has also made a lot of changes and started to create some outdoor spaces. And I've worked with other faculty and students in my lab on creating some outdoor study spaces, and a place called the Swim Patio, which is right outside our swim library. So it's really exciting to hear that other campuses are thinking about these things. The next set of questions are for all of the panelists. Again, we'll start with Kathy and then Chancellor Hawkins and then Howard. Starting with Kathy, how do you share your landscape heritage with students? Do you have signage, QR codes, or other approaches for sharing information about the design? And are there other ways your campus landscape is utilized pedagogically?
Yes. There are a lot of ways. We do have a variety of tours. We don't have QR codes everywhere. There are some tours that students have developed that use the QR. We've talked about that. There's an inherent kind of issue we have with encouraging people as they walk, for instance, through the Arboretum, to pull out their phone and be using their phone the whole time they're walking through. So a lot of it is a little more experiential, where there's small labels on things, and that's kind of on purpose. But we do have a series of I guess, podium that you would say that tell the history of the campus at different unique places. And this was done for the 125th anniversary. And so these things tell about the earthquake. They tell about the protests that happened in earlier years. They tell about significant moments, and they also talk about the Olmsted Plan and nature. But one thing I will say is that the Olmsted Plan is so fundamental to our planning. We include it in almost every presentation we do when we talk about any new building, any new infrastructure, any planning. It all is linked to the Olmsted framework, to the point that our president has talked about, do not damage the Olmsted framework, the Olmsted Plan. And normally presidents don't talk about landscape architects. So I think it's really so endemic in what we do. Every new building always starts with the Olmsted Plan and the intention, and that's only since the 1990s. We also have a lot of outdoor living lab. So there are a number of issues and experiments that go on. And we've had a 30-year study that we're working on establishing climate forward oak trees and seeing what will live as our climate changes, and have found interesting results from that. But there are many other groups doing a lot of experiments on the campus long-term for planting and design.
Thank you. Chancellor Hawkins, how about you?
Thank you. The enrollment management, people often tell me that if we can attract students to visit the campus, we have about a 75–80% chance of them applying. So there's a very practical dimension to campus beauty. And of course, we've taken great pride in the fact that we've had a relationship, indirectly, of course, with Olmsted. That very name sparks attention, it sparks appreciation, and it sparks, I think, identification with other major entities that many of you are speaking to now. And so the beauty of the campus is certainly, it speaks for itself, but we do have, it's often mentioned, as was just reiterated, that when you talk about this campus, you talk automatically about Olmsted, and therein is a huge benefit. We've also promoted it in signage. I mentioned just a few minutes ago, our first building on campus at the north edge of the quad that is the centerpiece, we renamed in 2020 after John Robert Lewis, former congressman. He was known and labeled by Martin Luther King as the boy from Troy. We knew John Lewis very well, and in 2020 we renamed that 90-year-old building in his memory. And so that icon sits just on the edge of that very centerpiece that we're so proud of. But it has affected from the standpoint of artwork. We had a beautiful rendering that has been reproduced over and again by the artist Alana Hagler. and it was a giclée, and then embedded in this beautiful piece of art, it's the portrait of the university, literally is the centerpiece of the campus or the plan. You have to look deeply into that artwork. And so I say all of that simply to say, every chance we get to identify with Olmsted, we seize that, because the benefits are huge, but the pride is even more so.
Thank you so much. Howard?
So we do a lot of the similar things that the chancellor just talked about and what Kathy talked about. We do have QR codes for our trees, for our arboretum. We have student ambassadors who give tours to prospective students, and we will do presentations to them so that they can be conversant about the campus and the campus landscape and the space between the buildings. There are lots of presentations that are done across the campus, as myself and our campus landscape architect and others are invited into the classroom to share the campus environment with students in all different curriculums. Alumni weekend, there are walking tours on campus. So you have people that haven't been to campus in 30 years and they're shocked at what they see, because they remember being able to drive their car right up to the front door of a building. And now they have to walk because there's this beautiful green space, or there's a beautiful piece of sculpture that is there. And, so we place public art very thoughtfully curated around campus so that it's not a sculpture garden, but it's distributed across our 400 acres in highly trafficked pedestrian pathways so that people can enjoy the campus. Faculty and students are using the campus as part of their pedagogy. We had one faculty who is well known for Urban Heat Island, and I read about some work he was doing in Louisville, Kentucky. And I said, we need to do this at Georgia Tech. So he installed about 30 sensors on campus, and then one in the Atlanta Botanical Gardens as his sort of ground zero point. And that research has been going on for about 8 years now. And I think there's this perception that Georgia Tech is in Atlanta and in a very urban, dense environment. And it really is a very traditional residential campus environment. And people are shocked about the beauty of the campus. And then the last thing I'll say, and it's not surprising at an engineering school like Georgia Tech, we have a pi-mile course, so 3.14 miles, that is a loop around the campus that people walk during their lunch breaks. There's a pi-mile race every year, and it's marked along the way. And so it adds fun to the experience of health and wellness, but also gets people to enjoy the campus.
Thank you, Howard. I just think it's so fascinating to have a discussion where we're really kind of flipping the image of a campus instead of thinking so much about the buildings, the academic buildings, and the indoor classrooms, and really thinking about our outdoor campus. We have at William & Mary, my students and I over the years have made the campus green space map, which is highlighting all the spaces outdoors in which they can study or socialize or eat or relax, or we've got a tree tour for exploring if they bring, their family or something. And it's really about highlighting our outdoor spaces and finding ways to utilize those spaces, because as we know, anything we can do outdoors, we're going to have that benefit, right? That mental health benefit, that physical benefit. So I love having a discussion where we're really thinking about the other side of the coin, right? In an academic setting. And so happy to be, colleagues with people who are thinking in this way. So our next question is, if each of you could talk a bit about the ways that Olmsted landscape design supports things like climate change resilience, ecological services, equity and inclusion, and or environmental stewardship on your campuses. So Kathy, if you could start with that one.
Okay, so I think that the fact that we have a plan enables the university to look at environmental issues systematically rather than building by building, project by project. We have that advantage over cities. We have that advantage over a lot of places because doing it building by building is very inefficient. And Stanford has huge environmental goals, probably among the most strictest in the country for universities. Zero waste, zero net carbon, 100% energy, no net new trips, meaning no new automobiles, maintaining a canopy coverage of a certain percent, and also kind of keeping a closed system of not wasting any water. So these are huge goals, and the only way they can be accomplished is with a plan. And the plan that we have from Olmsted starts in the foothills and ends in the Arboretum. So for instance, water runs through the campus from the upper areas and the lakes, goes through the campus during flooding. We kind of have channeled that, ends up in the Arboretum, doesn't go into the storm drain system. It gets pumped back into the lakes, and we use lake water for all campus irrigation. That's a closed system that you can't do elsewhere. We're looking at our trees and maintaining a canopy even as we develop. So we move trees, we infill with trees, and we basically have a tree forest and a resource for that. Like I said, we're studying the climate forward species as we go forward and as our climate changes. But we also are looking at things like general no net new trips. We have built the most extensive bike network imaginable, along with the shuttles and the commuting to the train, so that in 30 years of growth, we have committed to no net new trips the whole time. And as we grow, we've still supplemented that and built out the other alternative networks for transportation. And I do think that when we talk about mental health for students, students are worried about the environment. They're worried about their future and their planet. And so, and allowing them to participate in these studies, we have interns and we have fellowships where students are studying these things and working with the professionals to look at this, that use the campus as a lab. And I think that goes a long way towards their health and well-being, to feel like things are possible.
Thank you, Kathy. I just want to echo how this idea of how important it is to have a plan, which all of you have been talking about, this plan inspired by or designed by Olmsted, right? This vision, and that you're echoing this, you're communicating this, like Chancellor, you were talking about, you talk about this, you know, in your communications, to create that shared vision for that plan. So you remember why you're doing what you're doing. And Kathy, I'm so happy you talked about eco-grief. This is something I cover in my course, The Science and Experience of Ecotherapy, where we really talk about the eco-grief and how students are feeling about it, and then move through that eco-grief into kind of more empowerment and eco-conservation. So thank you so much for bringing up that point. Chancellor?
Thank you, Dorothy. And it prompts me to go back to the buildings you were talking about. When we arrived in Troy in 1989, there was an eclectic collection of buildings. And that's what generally we experience at these institutions. Sometimes a monument to an architect or a monument to an administration, and you wind up with a lot of different buildings. I had experienced that at two other institutions. And the first thing we did in 89 was to commission a firm to give us a set of guidelines by which we would renovate and build. And over time, if you're there long enough and you stick to that plan and you invest enough money, you can achieve a consistent look. And we focused on such basic things as roof, paint, brick, cupolas, you know, all those things. And we didn't want a futuristic design. We wanted a more traditional look that would withstand the test of time. After investing about $400 million, we've achieved. And that has really been part and parcel, I think, to this whole picture of the campus. And I wanted to mention that because it's seldom that you have that opportunity or seize that moment to try to get it right, even if you're midway of the race. What we're doing currently, and as I sit here, we're waiting for proposals to come in, bids actually, because as we renovated the part of our campus that had not been touched, but it was still adjacent to the very part that we had emphasized, we created this beautiful cultural arts park. And in the center of that there was a beautiful pond. But below that, we didn't have the funds to do what we're currently doing. But working with the Army Corps of Engineers, we are engaged now in protecting a watershed, redirecting a stream flow, creating waterfalls that will ultimately lead to a larger body of water. And taking the silt, about 6 feet of silt out of the base of this lagoon that has not been removed since 1958. So we're working really hard, making an investment in resources, money, as it were, to try to preserve and recreate and return. And as we've done that, we've actually increased by probably a mile the walking trails, the bicycle trails, the beauty of the campus that would be conducive to the community and our entire university community being outdoors. And so it ties together, but you require a plan, and if you work your plan, you can see that success over time.
Thank you, Chancellor. And I'm really hearing like something new, which is a focus on not just the green spaces, but also our blue spaces. And also Howard was talking about stormwater management too. That's a thing that we struggle with at William and Mary, but thinking about these blue spaces and really trying to, create lovely outdoor amenities as well with those, while maintaining management of stormwater and really supporting alternative modes of transportation, because that's how people, if they can get around safely and conveniently outdoors, they're going to spend so much more time in these beautiful outdoor spaces that you're spending so much money and time and effort and passion creating. Howard?
So to create these beautiful green spaces at many campuses requires water. And, one of the things that I was able to do, we installed about 2.5 million gallons of cistern capacity. So my goal was to not use potable water for non-potable use. Mm-hmm. So that's irrigation and flushing toilets in new construction and significant renovations. All of our athletic fields that our student athletes play on are all irrigated with harvested water, which is great. And we're able to sort of create a loop where in some cases we can take research buildings that have fume hoods and a lot of condensation, and we pipe those to the cisterns in the summertime when that air conditioning is on, and then we can irrigate the baseball field as one example. We are looking at blackwater reclamation facilities to harvest our combined sewers, and we're waiting on funding for that. But if we're able to implement that, we can save about 50 million gallons a year of potable water to service one of our central plants on campus. Back in 2007, Wayne Clough was president, and he signed the American College and University President's Climate Commitment. Wayne went on to become the secretary of the Smithsonian, but that legacy was really important because it put a line in the sand about institutionally, from the top down as well as the bottom up, that we needed to provide proper environmental stewardship of our campus. From the mental health and these other spaces in between, we've installed hammock farms. You can see that in my backdrop right there. There are several of these scattered around campus where students can rest, take naps, hang out with their friends. We've installed some slides where we have some topography changes so students can have fun. So college can be a fun experience and not always so stressful. And then certain times of year, and I think this is not uncommon on university campuses, we partner with folks to bring in their dogs to provide some comfort to our students, particularly during finals week and leading up to that. And they really enjoy that. It provides a lot of stress relief and releases anxiety. There's a lot of mental health issues that go undetected on our campuses and throughout our society. So we try to do our part to help mitigate that and facilitate opportunities where students can have balance. Obviously, there are other resources out there on our campuses, but we try to sort of be forward thinking and putting things in front of the students so they have easy access to it, as opposed to having to reach out to the dean of students or mental health support services on our campus. And on that same note, I think it's also important that nutrition is really important. There are some students who don't have proper nutrition, so we have opportunities for students to get free meals on campus and be discreet about that. So I think it's all part of this ecosystem that we create on our campuses to try to improve student success. Our campuses are very fond of student retention, but it's this whole network of support services that are critically important.
Thank you so much, Howard. So I do want to get to the audience questions, but I have one last burning question. Maybe we're just gonna like a couple sentences from each of you. What advice would you give if you had a 30-second elevators pitch? What advice would you give campus planners that are looking to enhance their landscape design to support human and environmental health and resiliency, student mental health, and all of these things that you've been talking about today? Kathy?
Okay, so I would plan your campus as a whole, not project by project, so that they're complementary spaces. I think you can't have too much green, but that's both on the ground and in the air as you look out your windows and as you're up and you're looking in your offices or your classrooms, what you see. I think that design should remain flexible. Don't over design things. The students want to make their mark and they want to change what the students before them did. And we're finding now more and more that they are not drawn to the architected landscapes and buildings. They are drawn to what they can mess up and build themselves and create themselves. So don't over design. It's not loved, and you have trouble making it work for the actual student.
Thanks, Kathy. Chancellor?
I think my advice would be what all of us, I think, adheres to, and that is keep your eye on the student in a campus environment. And our main role at Troy is to serve our students. I preach that daily. I think what Kathy said is to have the holistic view. I believe that the focus today on students' mental health is a priority, and green space is integral to that. And the last thing I would say is what you learn in the forest of South Alabama, and that is to measure 2 or 3 times and cut once. Plan.
Thank you. Howard?
So I think, every project at Georgia Tech, and it took me a while to convince and educate my colleagues, but every project site was 400 acres because you have utility distribution systems, you have stormwater runoff, you have tree canopy, you have transit systems, pedestrian pathways. So it all has to address things holistically. So it's this holistic integration of architecture, landscape, sustainability, technology, ecology, fiscal stewardship, public art, as sort of this comprehensive approach. And these plans that we hopefully all the campuses have, they are living documents. And it's important to constantly update those. What you think might work 10 years ago, all of a sudden doesn't work today. So it's really important to make those investments. And if you look at your buildings, I like the term long life, loose fit, because we build buildings for 100 or 200 or 300 years. They will be different. So design the building knowing that it will have a different program in 10 or 15 or 20 years. So how do you design it so that the buildings have good bones, but it can accommodate programs that we don't know about yet?
Thank you. So plan holistically, flexibly, and serve your students. Thank you so much. So I'm going to take a minute to get a question from the audience. Maybe we have time for one for each. So Barbara from Connecticut asked, do any campuses successfully promote a designed electronics-free zone where devices can be set aside for some moments of quietude and equanimity? And also related to that, what are campuses doing to create outdoor spaces for self-reflection and stress management? So does one of you want to talk briefly about that? We only have a couple minutes left.
Well, I'll take that one. We don't have an electronics-free space, but what we have learned is that, and I have asked students, they are drawn to places where they can be alone and think. And so there are a lot of places where, in the Arboretum, by fountains, I mean, they always say, my favorite place, I like to go here because I can think. The very social spaces are not the favorite places. So you really need to do places that can have events, but a lot of nooks and corners and places that have shade and are quiet. And that's the most popular spaces, to tell you the truth.
Thank you. And again, that question is from Barbara in Connecticut. So thanks, Barbara. And actually, I'm going to just make read one more thing that was in the chat that's really interesting. So Arlene Levy says, I hope you will also mention the Olmsted intentions to encourage a healthy sense of community within its residential spaces that goes beyond just the relationships and understandings of individuals and their surrounding environments. Educational environments should encourage humanism, tolerance, and respect for diversity of values, which is an excellent point. Thank you so much for that. So I think with that, given our time frame, I want to thank our distinguished panelists for sharing their time and their expertise and for all the amazing work that you're doing on your campuses. It's really wonderful to get to know all of you. And thanks to Dee Dee, everybody behind the scenes organizing this event, and of course, all of our attendees. And so Dee Dee, now I'll turn it back to you.
Terrific. Thank you so much. This has been an absolutely stimulating, fun conversation to hear what's going on in campuses across the country. I want to remind everyone that the program has been taped, so you can watch it again and you can invite your friends to watch it as well. I really hope that this will be shared broadly with the university communities, because I think we really have heard today some wonderful ideas. And with that in mind, I want to invite everyone to take a look at our university toolkit, which is on our website. There we showcase colleges and universities which are creatively introducing students to the importance and power of a thoughtful built environment. I think we've heard today a number of new ideas that we'll want to supplement, but again, we have a number of ideas there, and of course, encourage the broader university community to adopt these kinds of ideas when it comes to their landscape. And as we say goodbye today, just one more request. Now is the time to register for a variety of upcoming webinars on highway redesign, Olmsted on Staten Island, and Buffalo Olmsted Park design. On June 10, we are sponsoring a very urgent conversation, Restoring Community Connections through Highway Redesign. As aging infrastructure reaches the end of its useful life, Buffalo, Milwaukee, and other cities are rethinking highways and expressways. And these redesign projects offer opportunities to restore Olmsted parkland and community connections, something that we've talked about here today. So I hope that you will sign up for this program, which will feature leading landscape architects and city planners, including Sarah Zodi, Peter Park, and Cindy Zerger, as Milwaukee, Buffalo, and other places rethink their design. You can sign up at our website for this and other programs. So again, I want to just say thank you to our fantastic moderator and panelists. It has been a wonderful conversation. Until we meet again, we wish you all a great Memorial Day weekend. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you soon.